awaiting word from two Republican senators who say they are still undecided on whether Todd Blanche's nomination to be the next U.S. Attorney General should move forward. Senators Thom Tillis, John Cornyn continue to question whether the DOJ's controversial $1.776 billion anti-weaponization fund is truly dead, as Blanche has claimed. But that is not the only sticking point. Tillis told Blanche that he needed to meet with Jeffrey Epstein's survivors to earn his vote. And what do you know? Blanche met with several of them on Thursday. Tillis later posted, "I commend Todd Blanche for doing what all his predecessors over the last 2 decades never did. Meet with the victims of Jeffrey Epstein's horrific crimes. I appreciate his willingness to directly engage and listen to them." That praise, though, may have been premature. One survivor said Blanche's visit seemed to be more about winning Tillis's vote than hearing their concerns.
It had absolutely nothing to do with us, and it had everything to do with Blanche checking a box so that he can get a promotion. I didn't expect to walk out of the meeting feeling the way that we feel right now. It was demoralizing, to say the very least.
The meeting also underscores the larger question hanging over Blanche's nomination, whether he would lead an independent Justice Department. For more than 50 years, since Watergate, guys, presidents of both parties have generally observed norms intended to reinforce public confidence that the Justice Department makes law enforcement decisions independently of the White House. President Trump has repeatedly rejected that traditional understanding, to say the least. His belief is that the Justice Department should carry out his agenda. Critics contend Blanche's record and his testimony suggest he shares that view. During this week's confirmation hearing, Blanche offered another window into how he views the relationship between the White House and Justice Department.
Are you and President Trump friends?
I'm his lawyer, was his lawyer, and now I'm the Deputy Attorney General.
Is the Department of Justice that you are running independent from the White House?
The Department of Justice, like every single department in the executive, is part of the executive. I mean, Article 2 of the Constitution gives the power of the executive to President Trump.
So the Department of Justice should be independent or not?
I think, as I said earlier, the Department of Justice is under the executive branch. If confirmed, I will be member of the president's cabinet. So absolutely, my obligation is the American people and the rule of law.
So we'll talk
but that
about
being said, I am a member of the cabinet of the President of the United States.
I didn't hear independent there, did you? Joining us now, Glenn Thrush, New York Times Justice Department reporter, and Ankush Khardori, former federal prosecutor and author of Open File. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us at the table. Glenn, I want to start with you on kind of the reporting. We've had you on quite a bit as this has moved through the process. There are 2 senators on the actual committee who are like, nah, I don't know. I believe they're going to fold. And I also believe that when it comes to the floor, that all the other senators who are hemming and hawing are also going to fold. Am I wrong?
What would give you that? And we are dealing with the most titanium-spined aggregation of humans known to man. No, look, I think Tillis is really interesting because Tillis is kind of like a freelance dissenter at this point in time. He seems to be out there on a lot of stuff, so he could do a strategic retreat on this and still have some cred pushing Trump, for instance, like on blocking the SAVE Act, for instance. He gave an impassioned speech on the floor the other day. But it was very interesting, the whole thing about judicial independence. Todd Blanche has had the longest audition for any cabinet job in the history of the cabinet. Yeah. He was essentially running the department when Pam Bondi was there. She was a weak attorney general. Every single decision that was made, every political prosecution, the Seychelles, withdrawing prosecutions, Eric Adams, and all of the rest. He had an opportunity to either veto or make a decision on. He has shown, contrary to what he said in this hearing, his record is very clear. There has never been an attorney general that has been this compliant with the White House or at least mindful of the department's historic independence.
And on that point, Ankush, you wrote on Open File on Wednesday, the nomination is a referendum on the Trump Justice Department, and a vote to confirm Blanche is a vote to endorse the department's work over the last 18 months. The abuses, the false claims, the attacks on the judiciary, the incompetence, and the politicization. Blanche largely confirmed what we already knew about him, for better and worse. He has no problem following Trump's orders, and he apparently regrets nothing that he or anyone else at the department has done under his watch. And despite this, just to reiterate what Eugene said, Republican senators are going to fold. Like, Blanche is going to get confirmed.
My gut instinct is the same. I don't know who actually, he has a couple votes that he could lose, but not much. Tillis has already had been signaling that he was probably going to vote for Blanche. You know, Cornyn has equivocated a little bit coming out of the hearing. But there are then a few others, Bill Cassidy, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, and Susan Collins is up for re-election this year.
Let's not forget John Fetterman, the Democrat who likes to move over to the right.
I think he has said he's planning to vote against Blanche. So I think
I'll wait till the vote happens.
Fair enough. Fair enough. But yeah, you know, this isn't like a cabinet nominee from a year and a half ago. He has a track record, to Glenn's point. And, you know, it wasn't as if he attempted to account for any of it or to offer any sort of concessions. He really doubled down on the whole thing. And I have to say, you know, the fact that this happened the same week that Trump gave his speech on Thursday night, making clear at least his desire, if not his intention, surrounding the midterm elections, I found like doubly disturbing, because this is happening the same week the Senate is considering elevating someone who just told them that he views it as his obligation to take directions from the president, who has said falsely that there's a ton of evidence that the 2020 election was rigged, who has said he doesn't understand why anyone has any objections to sending ICE to the polls because illegal immigrants can't vote. But they are putting it in your face. And if the Senate votes to confirm this man, if Republicans get behind him, they will not be able to pretend that anything that's coming was not expected.
And even worse, Blanche was sitting there in the East Room for that speech, for the president's speech.
If these Republicans cared about the independence of the DOJ, they would have done something over the last 18 months. They clearly don't care.
Right. It's hard to see where the red line is, or if they even have one, to your point earlier, Glenn. But I also just want to say, not just the independence question, but also I'm curious if the Epstein, the way Blanche is handling Epstein and the survivors, is actually going to hurt him at all. And so I just want to run through some of the reporting. Our own Lisa Rubin for MS Now, reporting on the meeting with the Epstein survivors, wrote that Blanche maintained in that meeting that, quote, the FBI has the power to open investigations, not me. I'm just the attorney general, Blanche added.
Just a baby.
They're saying, oh, look at the FBI, not me. Then, according to AP, Blanche responded to the Epstein survivors. He was describing the meeting here, saying it wasn't all cordial because there's something that they want that I don't think I can give them, which is some form of justice. And I want to be able to give justice in the form of prosecutions. And maybe we can do a prosecution at some point. But he said, I don't know. So, again, is any of this going to actually hurt him when it comes to his nomination? And also, do you think that, separate from that, is there enough pressure that he actually mounts some kind of investigation?
That's a great question. Look, I think we're being a little glib when we say they're going to fold. The Epstein thing could really force Tillis's hand if this becomes this massive backlash. And his answer, let's just say, from a geek perspective, since he's been Deputy Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General oversees the Federal Bureau of Investigation, hard stop. He was and is Kash Patel's boss. He can tell him to do what he chooses, okay? I think if Tillis faces a sufficient backlash on this, he might waver. And let me just backtrack a little bit on John Cornyn. John Cornyn, to me, represents the biggest threat to Todd Blanche, because Blanche, the other thing that Todd Blanche didn't give any ground on was this unprecedented, extraordinary deal with the IRS that is likely to give Donald Trump and his family $100 million. But in terms of his meeting with the families, this reminds me very much of Blanche's meeting with the senators at the Capitol in late May, where they emerged from this meeting feeling like, what the hell just happened? So Blanche is not great inside a room unless Donald Trump is inside the room.
You brought up the settlement fund. Let's play that. Senator Cornyn questioning Blanche about that fund.
You have said that the weaponization fund is a moot issue. Is that your position?
Yes, it is a moot issue, meaning there is no weaponization fund. The weaponization fund is dead. It's not moving forward.
Is the settlement agreement enforceable as a contract by the parties?
Well, yes, it's an enforceable document. So I suppose if President Trump's counsel sought to enforce it, they potentially could.
Including the weaponization fund.
well, they could try to enforce the contract.
Oh, come on. You're the lawyer here. To me, that reads, it is not dead. The President of the United States has said that he doesn't want it to be dead. Todd Blanche refuses to sign anything to that effect. Yep. And it matters because we all know signatures on paper actually do have legal standing and binding.
Right. Well, look, it's quite clear that, the papering around this settlement was actually very sloppy, which is a separate problem. The Justice Department is pretty bad. The quality of their work has deteriorated. But, look, he made very clear, to your point, it's not going to be dead. I mean, he said it won't be dead until you pass a law, basically, is what he told the Senate. And he's claimed to support that. Till has claimed to support that. I have supported that for quite some time because I think it's the only way to put this to bed. But it's really not the position I expected him to take, since all he has had to do over the last few weeks was sign a couple of documents, either a court submission that was ordered from him or, Grace Meng.
A judge required him to.
Right. Correct, and he said no. The thing I would
How is that even possible? I wish I would tell a judge no.
You could not.
Yeah. I'm not signing your paper.
I just want to just tack on one thing, because there's so much, Cornyn and other people are worked up about how they wrap up this fund.
Right.
Okay, is it really dead? Let's just stipulate that maybe it is dead. I don't understand how the Senate could vote to confirm someone who let a sham lawsuit go through, did not have a single prosecutor respond in any substantive way to Trump's lawsuit. It was essentially a fraud on the court, as the judge concluded, I think, correctly. And the idea that this could all be acceptable and he still make it through, regardless of whether the fund is dead, it's remarkable. Attorneys get disbarred for things like that.
And gave the president and his sons immunity from investigations into their taxes from the past.
And the settlement never made any sense anyway. A Trump versus IRS case that all of a sudden yields nearly $2 billion for people who attacked the Capitol. It's nonsense.
Didn't the judge who smacked down the fund and the lawsuit and everything, calling it a sham, didn't she refer him?
Referred to the two lawyers. It is such a convoluted arrangement here. Blanche claims that he was not party to the negotiations, that one of his deputies were. The judge referred two of Donald Trump's lawyers who were representing him in this case for potential professional.
She also directed that the opinion that she issued be sent to the New York State Bar Association, which already has an investigation that should be pending as a result of prior complaints. I think if that investigation had not been pending, she would have been very tempted to do something like what she did to the other lawyers.
If Republicans, and that's a big if these two Republicans say no to Blanche, I think, Glenn, you've also made the point that this may all be symbolic because the president could very well keep Blanche in that position. Who knows for how long? But Glenn Thrush and Ankush Khardori, thank you so much.